As global power politics make a comeback and the liberal world order continues to break down, Europe is trying to become a unified superpower. Facing Russian threats, US uncertainty, and Chinese economic might, EU leaders are now pushing for bold changes. But with so many countries and so many agendas, can it really succeed? Hello and welcome to Roundtable. I'm Enda Brady. Now, in a world where great power rivalries are replacing the post-Cold War liberal order, the European Union is charting a bold course to redefine itself as a major world power, from bolstering defences against Russian aggression to expanding its economic clout amid an increasingly unpredictable US under Donald Trump. The EU leaders are pursuing ambitious reforms.
The European Union has long been an economic powerhouse, but in geopolitical terms, it's often had to rely on the umbrella of the United States. As Donald Trump's administration makes good on its promise to focus on its own backyard, European leaders are starting to seriously think about forging a true superpower. Trump's attempted Greenland grab has exposed the continent's fragility, earning it some tough love from America's northern neighbour, Canada.
Great powers can afford for now to go it alone. They have the market size, the military capacity, and the leverage to dictate terms. Middle powers do not. But when we only negotiate bilaterally with a hegemon, we negotiate from weakness.
With war raging in its east and Xi's China ruthlessly competing with the bloc economically, leaders are now aiming for a bigger, richer and better armed Europe.
The European Union, the European part of NATO, must be able to defend itself, and we are on our way to this, even though we are far from achieving everything we need to achieve. And the second thing, we want to have a competitive economy in Europe. We must all contribute to this.
In an era of trade wars and tariffs, decades of trade negotiations have finally started to pay off, with a major South American deal now near completion and a free trade deal with India announced this week. To underscore the emerging unity, Germany's Merz and Italy's Meloni signed an accord pledging deeper cooperation. But unlike superpowers America, China and Russia, the European Union has 27 different countries in its bloc, taking time and effort to reach unified decisions, especially with deep ideological divides throughout its many governments. If rushed and not done properly, a push to consolidate power could deepen cracks even further.
Well, let's bring in our guests to discuss this. I'm delighted to say here with me in the studio we have Jennifer Ewing. Jennifer is a spokesperson for Republicans overseas. We also have Freddy Gray. Freddy is the Spectator magazine's deputy editor. And Andrew Levi is a former British Foreign Office diplomat. You're all very welcome to Roundtable. Andrew, to you first of all, 27 countries, different sizes, different politics, and very different leaders. Can the EU really become a superpower?
It is a superpower already in some respects. It's an economic superpower, it's an international aid superpower. And I think that it's a military superpower in the sense that if you add up its military power, or that with UK as well, European NATO is pretty much the two together, it's about half the defence expenditure that the US has a year. That's a lot. But it's fragmented, and fundamentally the politics are fragmented. So it can't really be a superpower, not yet, in the way that the USA has been.
But there is the potential there?
I think there's a lot of potential, but that fragmentation is very historically based and hard to get rid of.
Jennifer, to you, we know your president is all about making America great again. Now he wants to make Europe great again. This is literally mega.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's fantastic that we're having this conversation right now, because a lot of people probably didn't see that the US a couple of days ago put out the national defense strategy. It got lost in the post sort of Davos drama and going into the weekend. But it's very clear he starts to refer to European NATO, right? And he very much makes clear that the new defense strategy is America first, is peace through strength and is common sense. And it talks about how obviously, Europe is going to continue to be our ally, but we're going to have to focus elsewhere. And European NATO. So we want Europe to continue to be, whether it's individual countries or the EU together. I mean, the whole idea, just put your own oxygen mask on first, each country, before we can help others.
Freddy, your thoughts on this, the EU's potential to become a superpower?
Well, I think EU-NATO is quite an interesting thought. I think, NATO itself, as the sort of, the defence of the West, has periodic existential crises. We saw one recently over Greenland, where, serious European figures, leaders in Europe were saying, what if we don't have America anymore? And then you have European leaders thinking, well, maybe we need to form our own defence system, defence alliance. And therefore you have this kind of sense that Europe's going to step up. And in many ways, it's a sort of anti-Trump movement. Europe's going to step up where Trump doesn't, in defence of free markets or free trading blocs. So you have the EU striking this deal with the Mercosur nations in Latin America. You have this massive deal with India. The EU see it as an opportunity to become the kind of neoliberal free market power of the world. Whether they can back it up with hard power is the real question. And I think you're quite right to point out that there is huge defence expenditure within the EU, but does it all join up? No. Is there the appetite for a European army? There hasn't been so far.
Thanks, Freddy. Andrew, to you, just on the EU trade deal with India, Ursula von der Leyen has hailed that as the mother of all deals. Now, clearly, this was a work in progress over 2 decades, so this was way, way before Trump, but it has come to fruition now. Do you get the impression he has really sharpened minds in European capital cities?
Well, I think the EU's been trying to do trade deals with countries like India, the Mercosur deal, all those things have been going on for a long time. But yes, I think that when you see the world potentially fragmenting with, it's always been America first, quite rightly, but a different kind of America first, I would say, than it has been in the past, then it does sharpen minds. So it's a big deal. It's nowhere near as big a deal for any EU member state or any member of the EU customs union, by the way, or has a customs union relationship like Turkey has. It's nowhere near as big a deal as those deals, right? The trade gravity, India's far away. Those countries, Turkey and the EU countries, are all much closer to each other. So getting your homework right domestically is really important, the single market, the customs union. But these overseas trade deals, long-distance trade deals like India, are very important.
Freddy, if it works, EU ends up as another superpower. Is that really what America wants, another rival?
Well, I think perhaps they do. I mean, Henry Kissinger's famous question, who do I call if I need to speak to Europe, has never really been answered, I don't think. And perhaps it would be better if there was a more unified bloc in Europe. But I think where you get this sort of defiance about Trump emerging from the European Union, we saw it at Davos with Emmanuel Macron, the president of France, with Mark Carney, the Canadian leader also, but very much being cheered on by European leaders, as he said, we understand the world is changing. The world that we lived in 20 years ago is no longer the one that we live in, and we understand that national protection, sovereignty, borders, things like that, they're important. So they're sort of accepting that the populists, if you like, have had victories, but they're trying to come up with their own answer to it. And this is very, very popular, it seems, for a lot of the media. It does seem to be helping a figure like Mark Carney. But there are tensions for Europeans, for instance, not just military, but the net zero agenda. They're going to stick by that pretty religiously, I think. It's not.
Jennifer, you're laughing. Just come in on net zero.
Well, no, I mean, exactly. I just think that's the other one of the views that Trump was elected on, is to deregulate a lot of our industry, drill baby drill, as he famously said. You cannot have a middle class if you don't have affordable energy. I mean, I know we probably, if we all live here, we pay electricity bills. It's insane. It's 5 times the cost. We're buying, in the United Kingdom, buying LNG from the United States at the wrong price, when, as Trump rightfully says, you're sitting on North Sea oil. So, if the United Kingdom wants to put its own people into, fuel poverty, that's crazy. You can't run a country that way.
Well, exactly. You took the words out of my mouth. Thank you for doing it.
And we just met, so we can plan that.
You said it much better than I would have done. But that is a real problem for Europe, is that, does Europe think that the future is electrified, in which case it gravitates more towards China and its great big global strategy? Or do we still think that fossil fuels are important? For now, they are, and Europe's going to struggle to keep up with an America that believes in that.
Andrew, to you, I want to go back and talk about tensions that Freddy picked up on in Europe. So lots of different countries in the European Union, 27 in total. But we have Western European countries, we have a Central European bloc, and then Eastern joiners as well. Like any big family, I guess there's tensions when they're all round the table. How can they get over those disagreements and unite?
By recognising their fundamental common interests, which are very considerable, whether it's economic, the common regulatory zone, which is known as the single market, is absolutely extraordinary thing. It's there's no other economic area in the world that competes other than the USA itself and China. So they can recognise that, but it's harder when you're on these areas of national sovereignty that go very much to the heart of what a nation, should we say, feels like, and you're sending people to war or just to defend anyway in dangerous situations. Military side of things is harder. But I'd say that the USA and Europe need each other. They've always needed each other. The European project is really an American project after the Second World War, pushed forward by a lot of Europeans, but pushed forward by Americans as well. And when Henry Kissinger said, which number do I phone Europe, he was joking, okay? The point was, of course, there was fragmentation, but he didn't want Europe to be too unified. The USA's never wanted that. Wanted to have the economic power of Europe, the military power of Europe, which was very considerable during the Cold War. Everybody's gone down since the Cold War. We need to go back up again. That unification, if Europe became a real superpower, you'd have two superpowers bumping up against each other across the Atlantic. Wouldn't be a good idea. So careful what you wish for, I'd say, to President Trump.
Thank you. Jen, in the European Union, we know President Trump has friends and fans. Viktor Orban of Hungary, he likes Giorgia Meloni of Italy, he plays golf with Stubb of Finland. He's got some friends.
Yeah, absolutely. And, it's interesting when you're talking about, the unification and everything. And I think what Trump, America First, likes is, rather than these supranational organizations, is, bilateral agreements, is one-on-one relationships. So yes, he has great relationships with a lot of the countries that are more looking inward, like we're doing in America right now, how to make Hungary as great as it can be. We in America look over at the EU telling Hungary, you have to do this, or you can't do this. And it just seems insane. It seems incredibly bureaucratic. And I think that's why, we're at the state we're at, is because America is looking at Europe. We might have a lot of similarities, but it's this just behemoth of bureaucracy, and nothing important can get done. Look at Russia, Ukraine, look at a lot of different decisions that simply can't get made. That's why the US loved Trump loved Brexit.
Freddie, just come in on that, the movement of decision-making. I often think of the European Union as an oil tanker. It gets there eventually, but it's very difficult to turn.
Well, a very, very important sector in the world right now is technology. And obviously the European Union has not kept up with America in terms of innovation, development of tech. And we're struggling to keep up with China too. So we talked about net zero being an issue, and so just the ability to produce energy cheaply being a problem. Europe is now up against these enormously powerful tech companies in America that have tremendous sway over US foreign policy. There are lots of conspiracy theories about it, but it's just true that they do. How does Europe stand up to them? Do they sort of grandstand about privacy all the time? But how are we realistically as how are Europeans going to stand up to the might of tech without its own technology sector that's thriving? Europe doesn't have anything comparable.
Jen, you're nodding.
Yeah, no, Freddie makes a great point about tech, and you'll know, what was it, a month or so ago, that deal that was penned, I think it was $35 billion of a UK-US tech deal, and the US decided to pull back from it, or rather not sign it, because of the Online Safety Act. And they're like, this is a, backdoor into censorship, and they didn't feel comfortable with that. I wish I had brought it with me, but there's a meme that you'll appreciate, Freddie, that shows 3 circles. It shows tech, China, the US, like who does the best, and then where it's like AI is still competition. And then down here is the EU. What does the EU do best? Regulation.
And that's particularly interesting for Britain because, of course, Britain is no longer part of the European Union, but the Online Safety Act brings us back into Europe's orbit rather than America's on
Absolutely,
tech.
absolutely.
Andrew, just on the issue of tech, how can Europe start catching up then, the European Union, in terms of competing or getting anywhere close to matching the likes of China and the United States?
I should declare an interest. I'm a former tech executive as well as being a former diplomat. So
we love the experts at Roundtable, Andrew.
people who hate both will see me in two spotlights of sort of red, devilish thing. But yeah, look, Europe, including the UK, somewhat less the UK perhaps, is quite far behind the USA and China on what we call tech. We're talking about not just things to do with social media, these very powerful digitally driven technologies that can do many things, although I think the promise of AI is very different from what a lot of the hype would suggest. So there is something to be done there. Cooperating with the US has been a great way to improve European and UK tech take-up. In my old role in the tech industry, I was working pretty hard to get European countries, including the UK, to do that. But if there's going to be some kind of rupture across the Atlantic, this has nothing to do with censorship, by the way, I would say, but let's not argue. But if there's going to be some kind of rupture, then it's going to make it very hard to do that. And so a sort of European tech autonomy might be needed, but that's just as hard, if not harder, than European defense autonomy. You need 10, 15, 20 years, certainly at least 5 to get a good head start, and you're not going to do it tomorrow. So what do you do in the meantime?
I know someone who doesn't like regulation. I'm guessing you're not a fan, Jennifer.
It's not that, but okay, let's look at the Bitcoin and crypto sector in the United Kingdom. There is no reason why this should not be thriving, right? We have the law, we have the insurance, we have the financial history here, and of course we have the tech. And the regulators in this country have been suffocating, to use the word, these wonderful innovators and these tech companies and crypto companies, and under the guise of, consumer protection. But it's a nanny state thing because what they're doing is just protecting the legacy institutions. They're not protecting the consumer. And by the way, Bitcoin's been the best performing asset, bar none, in the last decade. And United Kingdom citizens and many Europeans have been prevented from buying it in, a UK regulated way.
But they can still buy it, though.
They can still buy it. But okay, if we are looking for tax revenue here in this country, I think we need that, especially since we're driving out a lot of millionaires and wealthy people. In addition, we're looking for jobs and interesting things for people to do. Why wouldn't we get more involved in tech and the crypto industry? It just doesn't make sense to me.
Freddie, just looking at the European Union and other kind of factors at play here, we've mentioned China, Russia as well. How do you think those countries will feel if the EU does get its act together and become a so-called superpower?
I mean, it's hard to say very simply, but I think, China generally likes dealing with Europe. I think that's fair to say. I think there has been some pushback on some areas from Europe about Chinese influence recently, but generally it sees it as a more biddable partner than perhaps a Trump America and so on. I think a really fascinating aspect, and this does tie into sort of the global picture, is to what extent does the EU striking these trade deals undermine its own markets, its own abilities to do things? For instance, agriculture, which is really important. When the EU struck this Mercosur agreement with Latin American countries, farmers, who have been a very big story for the last year in a lot of European places, are angry about this because they're seeing it undermines their own interests. Similarly, India, massive agriculture, potentially exports, etc. Does that undermine EU farmers? Is Europe, in its attempt to build itself as this global superpower, going to undermine itself in the very ways it has been for the last 10 years, which has caused all this populism that they hate so much?
Thanks, Freddie. Andrew, to you, just on the issue of EU enlargement, we know there are countries knocking on the door who are very keen to join. Albania, places like Ukraine eventually want to come in once peace is established there. Do you think that's an important factor for the European Union to grow bigger?
if you look back to the first enlargement, which was in 1973 when the UK joined along with Ireland and Denmark, it was part of the American project. They wanted more countries to join for the European Union, the European Economic Community as it was then, to get stronger, to be a bigger, stronger partner for the US, not too unified and not too fragmented. Again, there's a sweet spot. Then with further enlargement, the end of the Cold War, this was a huge victory. George Bush Sr., saw it as a massive victory, and he was right. It spread prosperity, and in that sense, the EU has become a superpower and a stabilizing superpower across this whole, what we call a continent, Europe. It's really a peninsula at the end of Eurasia, isn't it? But the European continent. And so we've had an extraordinary success story. Now, when you get to countries that have had very troubled pasts, maybe even more troubled than many of the former Soviet bloc countries that are already joined, then you've got to be very careful, of course, as whether A, they can survive joining the pressures of the economic pressures and all that sort of thing, and B, whether they're going to politically be able to hold it together.
Thank you, Andrew. Jennifer, I just want to finish on defence again. Does it matter that we don't have a European Union army as such? Lots of strong militaries spending a lot of money because of your president. Does it matter that it's not centralised?
Well, I guess that's a decision for the European people. But if you go back and you read the defense strategy, it very clearly says we are done with this. I think he called it a cloud castle abstraction of rules-based order. So like the U.S. is stepping away. So if I were Europe, yes, I would want something very organized. Should I have to defend myself again? The first time I'd ever seen the term European NATO used. So there's all this subtle language, even. Yes, I think they probably should. I live here, so I'd like to be well defended.
I should say, just very quickly, the European pillar of NATO is a term that's been used since 1949. Okay. So
I stand corrected.
So just to be clear, and the Americans have recognised that, Europeans have recognised that, and it's been, again, a huge success story for better part of 80 years.
It has. Freddie, to you, just one last word on Greenland, recent couple of weeks.
Yeah.
That whole situation, it seems to have calmed down now.
Yes.
We don't know what's coming. We don't know what the deal is to be done. However, do you think that really focused minds in European capital cities about defence?
Well, we just put away an edition about that last week, and our subtitle was, "What was the Greenland drama all about?" Because it's a bit of a mystery why actually we got
penguins.
It wasn't penguins.
I know. They knew that. That was a joke. Come on, it's funny.
But what Trump's very good at is getting European leaders into a frightful tiz.
Yes.
With not really a lot of threatening. Yes, he said things, but did anyone really seriously think America was going to invade Greenland? I mean, the answer probably should have been no, but yet European leaders were getting in this, we're going to show a united front, we're going to show that we can stand up to Trump, and then feeling that they have stood up to Trump, but what actually has been achieved on either side? Not a lot. The New Deal is very much what was on offer before. People say Trump backed down. Yes, he did, but did he ever really ramp up? That's the other question.
Did you not feel, I'm so sorry.
Of course,
did you not feel, I did, that the threat of tariffs was real enough? Because he's imposed tariffs against European countries.
Well, I think Trump tariffs is an interesing one. I think if they're posted on Truth Social, you probably take them a little less seriously than if they're announced in
a speech by him.
They were announced in a follow-up speech. You're right. I think it was a dramatic escalation, definitely. But it was clearly done with a view to coming to Davos that week, with a view to lots of other things going on. Trade deals with the European Union. Ukraine was Trump trying to establish leverage with Ukraine. I think European leaders are not good at responding to Trump because they take him seriously when they should literally, all those sort of cliches about Trump. But they often misjudge what he's trying to do.
Yeah.
Andrew, I just want to finish with a thought from you on Europe coming together. Are we now in the next few years, and remember Trump has 3 years left, are we now seeing a more unified Europe? Whatever about EU becoming a superpower, are we seeing a more unified Europe?
If it's a yes or no answer, I'd say no. Europe is fairly unified, things we talked about before, very unified in some respects, single market customs union, absolutely, rock solid things until they're not. But that would be the same for the USA, not, for any confederative or federative structure. I doubt personally that Europe will become massively more unified through this process. However, I hope that the USA and Europe will find their sweet spot again and manage to carry this forward, because the world needs it. There are no two other combinations of powers that can pull together the economic weight and the military weight and the political decision-making capability, along with a long tradition of working together, many, many decades by now. There's nowhere else that can do it. And I don't know how many of us would want it to even be tried with China. That's a point of view that one can have. I'm not for it personally.
You're saying better the devil you know?
Not devil. It's been an incredible success story for so long. Let's make it continue, and let's find ways through these challenges.
Andrew Levy, thank you, and Jennifer Ewing and Freddy Gray as well. Thank you all. What a fascinating conversation. Remember, you can see more discussion and debate on our YouTube channel. Search for Roundtable TRT World. But for now, from me, Enda Brady, and all the team here, goodbye, and thank you for watching.